And hello, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name's Tim Baghurst, and today's guest is Ashlee Fontes-Comber. She is the president of United Soccer Coaches. Ashlee, thank you for joining me on the show. If you wouldn't mind, just share a little bit about how you got into this role in the first place.
Sure. Well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate you having me, and hello to everyone that is watching. It's been a journey, getting to the presidential role of United Soccer Coaches. I would say that it's not something that I thought would happen, but I'm certainly welcoming it. So I can give you a little brief snippet of how I actually got here. It started as an athlete, right? If we go way back, so it started with playing multiple sports. I actually played at Florida State for the women's soccer team way back in the day. And once I was transitioning out of my playing career, I unintentionally fell into coaching. I didn't think that I wanted to stay in sport, which I know a lot of athletes could probably relate to. Some of us go through this like identity crisis, right? Once we're done playing, then we're like, well, you wake up the next day and you're not going to train. And then what's the purpose of certain things you're doing? And there's no end goal. So it's really like trying to dig into yourself and figure out what's that next step? Who am I without that athlete association attached to me? So I tried not to get into sports, and I kept getting drawn back in. I ended up coaching first with some summer camps, which is great. And then started down the coaching education pathway, started getting more interested in it. Thought then there was like nothing better in the world to do instead of working 9 to 5 behind a desk, having to sit all day. It reminded me of being in the classroom as a grade schooler. There's nothing better than being on the pitch with kids that were ambitious and they had that drive that you remembered having, and it just all came back. So I've been coaching since my senior year in high school, actually. I did coach full-time for a little bit, and then went started going the front office route because I wanted to expand my knowledge and become more well-rounded in the game. And then, let's fast forward a little bit. I've been serving on the board of directors for United Soccer Coaches now. This is my 5th year, and you ascend each year. So this year is my presidential year. That was a really broad intro to how I got here. There's so many little, highs and lows and pivotal moments that did actually get me here. People along the way that made those impressions for me to know that, wow, this role exists. So I can dive into any piece there, but it's a long journey.
As president, it sounds like you're on a board. Is this a salaried position? What do you do for a living in order to do kind of the fun stuff that you seem to enjoy doing?
Right. That's always a question with coaching, and it's very important. And hopefully we get into that a little bit later with advice for up and coming coaches. I think you really need to understand what lifestyle you want to live, what lifestyle you want to lead, because that's going to help direct you and in which kind of coaching pathway you go down. This role as president, it's volunteer. So I actually work full-time for a company called Ata Football, a phenomenal new endeavor. They've been around since September of 2020, but it's all focused on women's football, which, as most know that do follow the game, there's just tons and tons of investment finally getting poured in. Like the gates are opened, records are being broken. I mean, there's just a lot of movement in that space. So I work full-time for Ata.
Okay. Now, you're now president, and I know there's multiple soccer organizations in the U.S. Describe to me what United Soccer Coaches is, because, we've had this discussion off air about just, my gosh, there's so many. And if I'm not in soccer, I may not be familiar with which organization I want to be part of or go to the conference of, et cetera.
Right. No, you've totally nailed it. Soccer in the United States can be daunting, I think, because there are a lot of organizations out there. United Soccer Coaches, to me, it's very much about community. It's a place where you can find mentorship, you can get educated. It's just the convention every year that we put on. It's an annual, refresh, reset of getting to know, the coaches, the latest and greatest things. But more specifically, United Soccer Coaches, like our mission is to provide programs and services that enhance, contribute to, and advocate for the development and recognition of soccer coaches, players at all levels of the game. So we have our education, which is great. I came up through their education, and those were honestly some of the best times that I had doing the residential courses, because it's like camp for adults, and we get to pretend like we're 18 years old again, trying to play, but it takes a little longer to warm up, and I don't know if I can actually strike the ball like with the power that I used to. But then you get to sit in together, and obviously we've gone virtual for a lot of our education too, and some hybrid stuff. But it's great when you can sit in with people across the country, across the world, and have conversations about what their experiences have been, what has worked for them, in terms of tactical play or technical development with their players. And I mean, that's priceless. Like you can do all these. Yeah. It's fantastic. But the wild web of soccer in this country is, it's good research for folks.
It's pretty convoluted, and I'm trying to wade my way through it, and it's not without its challenges. We'll put it that way.
Right.
But now you find yourself in a leadership position where you're making big decisions, and you're having to address some of maybe the drama that goes on behind the scenes. How some people may be in leadership positions now, but some people may just be coaches who are leaders, but maybe don't make the big decisions. What do you think you've learned being president that you didn't necessarily know before you stepped into that role?
I would say that I didn't realize how much coaching actually prepared me. So even though we're saying that, as a coach, we're not making like big decisions, that they probably don't affect like 30,000 people or, policies that go across the country, anything like that. But as a coach, the amount of impact that you are having each and every day on a single individual, because of how close contact you have, is way more powerful, way more influential than me signing off on something here's what our strategy is going to be for the future of the association. So I think that actually being a coach and understanding how much I actually care for each and every one of those individuals prepared me for the philosophy that's carried me through life. And it's very human centric, right? So as sitting on this board as president, I'm always thinking about the person first, the coach, right? How is that going to impact the decisions that we're making? And if we always have that humanity in the decisions that we make, I think we're probably going to err on making a good decision, even in the tough times. Even when it's, two wrong decisions, we'll take the one that's going to be more positive for the individual.
The least worst decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. We've all been there. Those are tough. Yeah.
What do you see, big picture now, looking at coach education, and obviously you're in soccer. What do you see as an area that coaches need? Where do they need training and development?
Gosh, I think we see it. It's in front of our face so much more frequently now than it has been, like even when I was growing up. But we have to move away from the X's and O's. That is very important, because we do want to win, right? We want to compete, we want to win, we want to develop our players. But we need, again, going back to this humanistic piece, we need to be player-centric, the human first. We're seeing kids, athletes, professional athletes, college athletes struggling. Some of the most successful ones struggling mentally, and that if we don't care, that's a problem. Like we should be caring about our players. We need to learn how we can educate ourselves, how we can support our athletes. and make sure that they have the resources that they need to be guided so that they don't feel like, my identity is lost or there's too much pressure here, or just realize, like, remember when you first started, if it was swimming, if it was playing basketball, soccer, whatever it was, when you first started at like 3 years old or 10 years old, you were out there because you loved the game. That was it. You played because you loved it. You didn't play because your mom or dad was screaming at you. You didn't play because your coach was putting pressure on you to be the best. You weren't playing for $1 million contract. You played for the love of the game. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to figure out how we can support coaches so they can still, achieve their dreams, but at the same time, understand how we can create really safe environments and spaces for these players to, one, come as they are in all their uniqueness, and then two, feel really good about, hey, this is for the love of the game. Yes, I will challenge myself. I will push the boundaries, but at the end of the day, I can go to sleep at night feeling good about what I'm doing in my life, and playing a sport is just a part of that, but it's not all of it.
So maybe this is the $1 million question. How do you help coaches to put the athlete first in that athlete-centric model that you just talked about? Is it more training? Is it some kind of development? Is it maybe less emphasis on winning, which is hard to even imagine because we're in sports to win? How do we actually do this so that coaches change their philosophy and their way of thinking that has existed in the United States for decades?
Yeah, you're right. It is the $1 million question. It is extremely challenging, but I would say the positive side of it is there's a lot of thought going into it. It's going to take time to figure out. Nobody has an actual blueprint for it right now. But one thing that we do, I know at United Soccer Coaches, we're very in tune to the landscape of what's going on and what support is needed for our coaches, because we listen and we advocate for them. So if there's more courses on psychology, on understanding how to work with your athletes to support them better, then we do that. I think part of it, this winning at all cost culture, it does start from the top. So if you're at a youth club coaching and the folks that are in charge are saying you have to win, well, that's a problem because you're creating this culture that's not very healthy. We should be driving and re-emphasizing that we want to develop players, but community citizens. We want to develop good human beings that we can keep in the game, that are then going to go back out to their communities and inspire more kids to want to play. And then we're talking about the growth of the sport and the game and the love culturally, the shift that we'll have. It can be so powerful, but it is extremely challenging just because of where we've morphed to. I would think in the last 20 years in terms of youth sports period, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and then if they're starting there at the youth side, then think about when you get into college and then when you get into the pros, it's a tough culture, and it's going to take time to shift. So not a clear-cut answer, but again, I would reemphasize that there are a lot of conversations going on, a lot of brainstorming, trying to figure out how do we actually make some subtle changes that can have greater impact.
I've got a question for you in a minute from the chat box, but the challenge, I think, for club sports in general, because let's move away from high school or middle school sports, whatever. In club, a lot of times those clubs rely on the membership of how many players they have in their program, what the parents are paying, et cetera. And they often use the success of some of those athletes in their program to promote why you should be part of our club.
Right.
Well, how do we judge success? We don't say, well, you should come to our club because Georgie over here was very successful as a lawyer one day and learned a lot of skills in our program. No, they talk about their on-court or on-pitch success.
Right.
And as a consequence, it is judged by winning. And I think that is a challenge for driving away from, yeah, sure, having that success is important, but look at about all of these other athletes who've come through our program and gone on to develop great skills that they're using in a variety of different ways. Easier said than done, of course.
Right.
Question in the chat box is from Belford. What are metrics for coaches to be judged upon when it comes to creating a player-centric environment? Do any exist?
Yeah. So I would say, just speaking from a soccer perspective, there's not a one case fits all metrics. There are, like Tim and I joked around before, there's a lot of organizations in soccer across the country. It could come down to what club you're coaching for, what high school you're coaching for, just what larger organization. So if it's US Soccer, or if it's United Soccer Coaches, or if it's your local club, they're going to have different standards based on, going to what Tim was saying, how they're defining success. Right. So if I'm at a club that's driven by development of the player, then we're going to have a metrics that's going to say, okay, at these different age ranges, they should be hitting, these players as coaches, we should be developing them to hit different milestones. So maybe that's the quality of their first touch when receiving the ball out of the air, heading. So we'll have technical components that are in there that will rate them, some physical components, some tactical components, and then some overall like mental and competitive components. So then, and I think evaluating and feedback is extremely important, because again, we want to drive our players into this growth mindset. I think, again, it's so important. We see kids drop out so fast because all of a sudden they hit a wall and they think, okay, I'm not good enough. It's like, no, this is where you are right now. And this is great, because if we can identify where you are right now, then we can give you a growth development plan on how to get better in these certain areas, how to strengthen your strengths, and how to improve, things that you're not so good at. So long-winded answer, there's not really a general, like, here's how you do it. It's going to be based on who you're working for, really, and how they're judging success, and if they're interested in development. Some organizations, you'll see, they don't even do any kind of metrics or evaluation. They'll just want to know how many wins, how many losses. And I think that drives the wrong message.
Right. Well, dropout rate would be also an interesting statistic, because if those athletes aren't enjoying the experience and the coach doesn't have that care of athlete, chances are those kids may not be surviving. Surviving is a wrong term, but thriving, I guess, in that environment.
Right. Yeah. There's a good saying, real quick, that, so I didn't even interrupt you. There's a good saying that our CEO always says, and I love it. It's, kids quit the person and not the game. And that goes to coaching. Right. Yeah. And then I would also add to that there is a place for every kid to play. If you have a bad experience, it does not mean you do not like the game. That just means it's not the right fit for you. And there is a place for you to play. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned metrics and rubrics, et cetera, and how much you enjoy them. My experience, a lot of coaches don't enjoy them. Mm-hmm. And I've often wondered why, because if we do have a growth mindset and we want our athletes to have a growth mindset, we as coaches should also have a growth mindset whereby we want to get better. And I had an example. I was with some athletes this morning, and I talked about videoing, right? Doing some video analysis. Oh no, I don't want to see myself on camera. I don't want to see that.
Right.
And my response was, of course, yes, I understand you don't want to see it, but in order to improve, I need you to see what I'm seeing. Right. Yet, it's so rare for me to have ever met a coach who said, no, I videotape my coaching so that I can go back and look at how I'm doing it, or I give it to an expert for review. Why don't coaches have that growth mindset of themselves when they want it for their athletes?
No, that's a great question. I can't speak for everybody, but
of course,
I would think my initial reaction would be, I think it's a resource capacity issue. I think some coaches love that and would absolutely be welcoming to it. I never really understood the concept until it happened to me. It wasn't even a thought in my mind until I was coaching for VYSA ODP. And I had some of the best mentors there. Paul Shaw was phenomenal. And he's like, I'm going to come assess your game. Like, okay, I was a young coach, probably just a few years out, just out of, Florida State and fresh off my coaching education diploma. So I'm like, okay, I know this pretty well. I know what I'm doing. And after the game, he came over, he's like, and he starts showing me these pictures. I'm like, what is this? And it's like how my huddle is formed, or when I'm speaking to my players, look at my positioning, look at their body language. So it was like all these little details that I'm learning as a coach on how to develop my players, but I never thought about that as me as a coach. So I do think it was fascinating to me. And then I'm like, give me more, but he was so phenomenal in caring about, like, as I do about my players, he cared about me as a coach and his other coaches. Unfortunately, I think you will have coaches or coach educators, mentors that really do care and will put that time and effort in. And then sometimes there's just not enough time to do it, but it would be great. I mean, you do get it in your coaching education courses for soccer. It's part of the requirements. We'll see. It would be great if it was more consistent, for coaches
I would
see.
love to see more national organizations develop that as part of their certification, and it's ongoing. I mean, we as educators have to, we actually don't have to, but those of us who have that growth mindset, come in, watch our class, give us feedback from those who might be considered expert teachers. And I think the same thing is needed for coaches. I will also add to that, in having that discussion with these athletes this morning, a couple of them came and said, okay, we want you to come help us. And the first thing I said is, I need you to recognize that you need to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And I suggest that maybe coaches don't have that vulnerability or push it aside because of the position that they're in, maybe the role that they have, the responsibilities, the fear of finding out something that nobody's supposed to know. Mm-hmm. It's a difficult one because they're in the spotlight, and here you are coming in, poking and prodding, trying to find the dark corners. And that's a scary thing.
Right. Again, I think you're right with the vulnerability piece of it. You have to remember, being a player, if you were an athlete, for these folks that are coaches, you get critiqued, but again, that's part of your growth and development journey, right? Like, I should want to know my strengths and weaknesses. I should want to be evaluated, and I can't take it personally. And yes, it absolutely does feel uncomfortable sometimes. It
hurts.
Yeah. It's like, gosh darn, I thought I did that really well.
I was good.
Yeah. And then you get knocked down a little bit. It's like, okay, but it's great to know, because you should be a lifelong learner. Mm-hmm. And there's always something new coming out. There's always a new perspective. And it's great to take in that information, learn and see how it jives with what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. I do think I think we just, to your point, I think we just lack a consistency of standards across the board. Because you'll see a bunch of different, like, again, going back to soccer, there's so many youth clubs across the country. Everyone has different standards, coaching standards, player development standards. It's all over the place. And I'm sure it's very similar in other sports too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One more question on this, and then we're going to move on. Again, Belford, is there a market for professionals to focus on building player-centric environments with teams? Something I'm very interested in. I'm not sure how to package it in a way that would be receptive to coaches to hire me. Suggestions or thoughts? Since there's no direct metrics, it'd be hard to assess if it's working.
Okay, so I think focus on abilities. Let me see if I can answer this. This is long, so just let me know if I'm not answering it correctly for you. I do think there's lots of opportunity right now to get into environments, to create player-centric atmospheres. So I think we're like as a society, we're just highly in tune right now, or aware that there aren't things going as they should be. And you see a lot, for example, you're seeing a lot of new hires in like, people, culture management type, chief diversity officers. You're seeing a lot more hires come in to help internally with organization of diversity, inclusion, belonging, right? So I think more organizations are under pressure to make sure that they have somebody within their organization or association, whatever it may be, to have a focus on this so they can be better. So like if you look right now, like MLS is making a massive push on this end and they're doing a really good job. I think you can, and again, I'm speaking specifically from my knowledge of soccer. I'm not sure what other organizations are doing, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there. It's just when you go in, do your research to see what is the mission and philosophy of those organizations. And then that could give you a good idea of what, if it's a good fit.
Let's talk about coaches in general and in your experience as a coach and now in United Soccer coaches. We've talked a little bit about what they need. What advice do you have for those who are coaches or maybe interested in becoming coaches from the experiences you've had?
Sure. I think, look, always be willing to learn, listen, and collaborate. I mean, I always tell my players this. I mean, you honestly, each and every one of us, we are the only people that can limit our progress, our success, however you define it. As soon as you get it in your mind that there's no more you can do or learn, you shut yourself off. You can always grow. I think what's been extremely helpful for me is, look, I've had some really bad coaches growing up, and I've had some really great coaches. And both, I think, equally have been extremely helpful to me in understanding how I want to be as a coach, because I remember how I felt in those moments with a good coach and a bad coach. I've also had great mentors in coaching. Like I really lucked out on that side of coming out of college, and the folks that just reached out, which had never happened to me before in my life, that they just took me under their wing. So being able to find good mentors, I think is extremely helpful. I also would say, in terms of collaboration, I think it's really important to not be afraid to reach out. So for example, when I was on the front office side, our head coach had reached out. So again, this is soccer. Our head coach reached out to an NFL coach, and he just wanted to learn, cross bridges there and learn, well, what are you doing? Because in the United States, obviously, NFL is way built out, way more than soccer has been, just institutionally, historically, everything. Well, what can we learn from this coach? So he was able to jump over and do some knowledge gathering through collaboration with this other coach. I thought it was brilliant. It's not something that I thought of, 10, 15 years ago. But it was important. So I think just being open to learn, listen, see what other people, if you have a role model, what have they done? What has their career pathway looked like? Because that could give you also an idea of what direction you may want to go. That's how I ended up in my role at United Soccer Coaches. I had somebody that I had looked up to, and I'm like, well, what has she done? And I went into her LinkedIn profile, and I saw that she was president of United Soccer Coaches. That's where I did all of my licensing, and I didn't even realize that could be an opportunity for me. So because of that, I pursued this pathway, and if I hadn't looked into it, then I would have never known it existed. So never be afraid to go out and ask. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that people that have had what they deem as successful careers are very, very willing to help and just give feedback and any kind of advice for young up and comers.
Yeah, I think that's a consistent theme across many of the interviews that I've done, is just the networking, the mentorship, and being willing to ask, and then finding out that most people are actually willing to help as well. Speaking of which, if somebody does have a question watching this in the future, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Sure, absolutely. Just go ahead and send me over an email. You can email me at fontes.comber@gmail.com. You can also reach out and connect on LinkedIn. I think that's actually a great way. That has helped me tremendously navigate my career too. So you can always request a connection on LinkedIn, and then you can follow along with, what's trending, what's going on, and what I'm involved with as well.
Great. Well, Ashlee, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom. Just a reminder, of course, everybody, we try to interview somebody every couple of weeks. So be sure to subscribe or like wherever you're watching this from. But on behalf of myself, Tim Baghurst, and Ashlee, thanks so much for watching.
All right. Thank you.